2 less things I have to do when I get home. But it's simple, right? And if you're not an acts of service kind of person, then that's not going to feel very loving. Right? So acts of service, quality time, gift giving, physical touch. Some people don't need a lot of words. They just like touch. They like their partner to hug and kiss them a lot. And some people need the attaboys, the words of affirmation. So if you know what you feel most loved by, then you ask your partner for that. And then the secret is you got to go figure out what makes him or her feel loved and give that to them. I know a couple who had a terrible argument because he had bought her a pearl necklace. He liked gifts, and he wanted to surprise her with a gift. She was furious because she had been asking him for help around the house, and he wasn't doing it. So it felt to her like an affront, and she asked him to take the pearl necklace back to the store. How do you suppose he felt about that? He didn't feel loved at all. He was pissed. Absolutely. But all it really was a conflict in those 5 love languages. Anybody think of a time when that's happened to you? When you really meant to do something good for a partner and it just didn't go over well? And you couldn't figure out why? Because you'd have liked it. Right? So the 5 love languages are important to just keep in mind as you think about in a relationship, what is your partner like? And sometimes we have 2 or 3 favorites, right? But have a conversation, and in the handout that is in your book, the 5 love languages are listed, so you'll be able to take those with you, have a conversation, know what it is you prefer, ask your partner what they prefer, and then see if you can do that more. So the key is, don't keep giving them what you like, give them what they like, and tell them what it is that you prefer. See if you can get a little wiggle room in there, and that can help, okay? Now, another psychologist did some research on what he called men's and women's top 5 needs. And the funny thing about these is they're different. The top 5 needs of men are extremely different from the top 5 needs of women. It's amazing we ever get together in the first place, frankly. All right, so we're going to cover the top 5 needs. Men's or women's first? What should we cover? Men's? Men's? Like, let's cover our needs first. All right. Again, this won't be rocket science. What do you suppose men's #1 need is? Are you guys cheating by looking at the book, or did you just know that? You know, Steve Harvey, the comedian Steve Harvey, is very clear about that. Yes, sexual fulfillment is what Dr. Willard Harley's research said is men's #1 top need in a relationship. And by this he means consistent sex, not just sex the first few months of the marriage, but sex ongoing for the rest of our lives at a reasonable pace and rate. Sex. #2 for men, recreational companionship. This does not include sex. We've already covered that one. No, this is not a subset of, and then we have afternoon, weekend sex. No. I heard the muttering. I know where you were going with that. Recreational companionship, doing fun stuff together, somebody to hang out with your clothes on. I know, look, you can't help it. It's the end of the day. The cookies only helped so much. I know. Recreational companionship. #3, a partner who takes care of herself. One of the things that I think is important, really for everybody, but men are visual learners. So apparently Dr. Harley says no matter how much time has passed, men still prefer women who maintain the self-respect to take care of themselves. Now, everybody has different taste in what they find attractive. But what men will often say is, I just need her to continue to take care of herself like she did when we met. And a lot of that has to do with having confidence and self-respect to take care of oneself, right? So he says that's the 3rd need for men. Simple. Seems simple, right? So far, so good. Anybody disagreeing yet? You can see me afterward. We can write Dr. Harley and disagree if we have to. Okay. The other thing that he says is really important, and again, this sounds really 1950s, but he says this is what his research shows. Domestic support. Men still like to be able to come home to a house that's still standing. Food, clothing, shelter. Even though we also know that men like their partners to work and to be independent and to do all that jazz, they still like the domestic support. Anybody disagree with that? No? All right. And then the last one he says, and I think this is important, if there's anything I spend a lot of time with women on, it's this one. And this has to do with emotional loyalty and appreciation. One of the things I notice is that in my office, one of the complaints I often have registered by men is that, you know, she'll give me this list of 10 things to do, and I'll do 8 of them. And she'll say, what about those other 2? And the analogy I use for this is he goes deer hunting, and he comes home with his deer. He's really proud. He killed the deer. And she's going, really? Really? I thought you were looking for a moose. You can't get a bigger deer than that? And what I always tell women is all he wants to do is make you happy. His goal in life is to make you happy. So forget those other 2 things and say, that is the best damn looking deer I've ever seen. And then I tell women, this is the secret. This is the secret for women. You will get those other 2 things. And you don't even have to mention them. Because as soon as you say, there's no better deer hunter out there than you, baby, he's going to think, shit, I got to go get more deer. I got to be right back. I'm on my game. I got to go get my deer. Right? Is that true? But if you come home and you get, what about those other 2 things? You really got to gear up to go back out hunting. So I tell women, there is a piece about men that needs, and I say he's never going to tell you this because men don't do that. They won't tell you. Emotional loyalty. And it has to do with saying, this is what I appreciate about you, and you rock my world. You are my Brad Pitt. There's nobody else for me than you. Nobody does it better. And it also means not telling the bad stories that make him show his ass in public. You may know them. You probably do if you've been with him. You don't tell them to anybody. Right? And sometimes people tell stories because they think, this is really funny. You know, last night he did this thing. It was really funny. And he's thinking, you're going to tell that story? Right? So there's a piece of emotional loyalty that women can learn about. And that basically is that men need to feel appreciated for killing the deer. And that she's always got his back. Top 5 needs. All right, ready for women's? You won't be surprised these are a little bit more complicated. And now sometimes I start seeing people scratch their heads. But we're going to get through this together. Okay. Number 1. Number 1 for women, affection. Now, if we hop back for a second to the 5 love languages, we realize that affection might be verbal and it might be physical. It kind of depends, right? It might be notes. It might be gifts. It kind of depends upon how she rolls. Everybody know how she rolls? It's going to be different for everybody. Affection. If she says, you never touch me enough, then you know, right? You never tell me you love me enough. Oh, I have a funny story about that. There's this cartoon. It's an old cartoon, but I think it just exemplifies so much. There's this guy, and he's reading the paper in his chair. And his wife is standing in front of him with her hands on her hips. And the bubble that comes out from behind the paper says, honey, I told you I loved you when I married you. If it changes, I'll let you know. Suppose that was an introvert or an extrovert? That's an introvert, right? Because he's checked that box. He's thinking, didn't we already cover that? Do I need to be redundant? Now, if we go back to the women's top needs, number 1, affection. So if she says to you, you just don't tell me enough, you got to amp it up a bit. I know it's going to feel redundant. You're going to think I've covered this. But again, putty in your hands. So secret, putty in your hands. If you got to say I love you every day, it's going to be like brand new to her. I tell people, write it, text it, do whatever you got to do to get that on paper. And then she can go look it up when she needs to, right? Email it, get it down on paper. By the way, my mother always said, don't write anything down that you don't want to see in tomorrow's paper. So I always think that's really a powerful thing, especially when it comes to arguing. Anybody ever have an argument over texting? Yeah, it doesn't go over well. I've done it. It doesn't work well, does it? No, and then you end up with only so many characters, which can help, actually. But, you know, the problem with that is that we're so quick at texting now, we can still say all the bad stuff that we would say in person. You know, in the beginning, we weren't so good at texting, and it took a while. But now, we're really good at it. So we can argue really well over texting. Try not to do that over texting. But you can send your I love yous over texting. Your sweet nothings, how hot she is, right? Women's top number one need, make a note of that. Affection, consistently. As much as you need the sex, she's going to need the conversation, the texting, the emotional words. That's not surprising, right? Does that fit for the most part? Anybody ever get accused of not saying stuff enough, the loving stuff? Like, they need to hear it more. You don't really love me. Do you love me? Okay. All right, so you know who you are. All right. Well, it'll be an easy one to fix then. You just amp it up a bit. All right, number 2 for women, communication. Again, that's probably not surprising, right? Women have more words to use generally in a day than men, and that's okay. The good news about that is you don't have to use as many. You actually can just sit and listen. But if you go into the nothing box with the remote, while she's using her words, do you think she'll notice? They do, don't they? And then they say, what are you thinking? And now you're screwed, because if you say nothing, right, which is probably the truth because you zoned out minutes ago, words ago, you reached your limit, right? This is why women have girlfriends and family that they talk to more. She's going to have more words to use. You don't have to keep up. Do your best to listen. Women's number 2 need is communication. Now we're going to move on to, I'm not going to beat that one up. You know that. Number 3, this one's trickier. Transparency. I have more people scratch their heads about this. Do you ever have somebody ask you stupid questions like, what'd you have for lunch? How was your day? And you say you had a sandwich. Really, what'd you have in your sandwich? Oh, who'd you eat with? Oh, what time did you have lunch? And you're thinking, really? What is this, an inquisition? Right? The thing about women is women like to feel connected. And if she knows you had turkey with avocado and Swiss, she's going to be so happy. She's going to be like, really? Cool. Was it good? Yeah, you're not done yet, right? Just a few more follow-up questions. There's this funny thing about women that likes transparency, likes information that to you is going to seem completely miscellaneous, perhaps annoying, depending upon how your day's been. But if you know that it's like the number 3 need of women, at least according to Dr. Harley, you can bear with it a little better, right? When she's asking you if you had pickles on your sandwich, it's not to piss you off. It's really because she just wants to know more about you. Does that even make sense? Can you wrap your minds around that? It's kind of odd, huh? Anybody get those questions? Yeah. So that, and I tell you what, if you're getting those every day, that's because you got a partner who really cares about you. They don't ask those questions when they don't care. Although if you're with an introvert, she's going to ask less questions. I do guarantee you that. She'll be like, how's your day? You'll be like, fine. She'll be like, cool. It's easier in some ways, really. All right. Women's number 4th need. It's getting a little easier, I think. Financial support. Financial support. Apparently, according to Dr. Harley, women still want men who kill the deer and bring it home, even though she may be off deer hunting too. Financial support. Pretty straightforward, and that's kind of an easy one, right? Whew, finally, we're getting to stuff that makes sense now. And number 5, family commitment. According to Dr. Harley, it is important to women that men are involved with the kids, with the family, if there aren't kids, with the pets. Do you mow the lawn on Sundays? Change the sprinkler heads? Right? Fix stuff? But family commitment. Are you invested in the family? Are you hanging out with the family? All right, those seem straightforward. So for men, pay attention to the top 5. For women, pay attention to the top 5, and that ought to ease the burden a little bit. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, got it, okay. One little second for chemicals in the brain. When we start dating, and we talked a lot about adrenaline today, when we start dating somebody, there are some chemicals released in the brain that are akin to drugs that make you want to stay up all night, have a lot of sex. You can talk more than you've ever been able to talk before about everything and anything under the sun, even introverts. And you cannot believe your good fortune. That's a chemical. It's actually a bunch of them, but there are a few that are really to blame. The interesting thing is these chemicals subside I know, it's true. And it's kind of disappointing.